thoughts about yourself are indistinguishable from negative emotion. That's how heavily tinged they are with negative emotion. As soon as you become self-conscious, as soon as you start thinking about yourself, you're instantly anxious and miserable. They're the same thing. Becker didn't read Jung, by the way, even though he wrote a book on the psychology of religion, and he said in the intro that it was unnecessary to read Jung, which was exactly wrong given what he was doing. But Becker basically posited that we had to create fabrications to defend ourselves against negative emotion. That's the essential message of that book. And what that means in some sense is that the whole corpus of human endeavor is an attempt to escape from the realization of mortality. And I think, well, wait a sec. No, we're also escaping from mortality.
Yes,
right? It's not just the thoughts of it.
Right.
And it isn't obvious to me at all. And I think almost all of clinical psychology would suggest that this is true, is that falsification as a defense is actually counterproductive in the final analysis. And most of the great clinical theorists, Rogers say, perhaps in some sense foremost among them, but perhaps not, insisted that it was the truth that set you free, not the web of defenses that you had erected by necessity to deal with your neurotic death anxiety. That's actually counterproductive.
Yeah.
So one of the things you do in clinical work all the time, especially in the cognitive behavioral field, is you help people identify those thoughts in some sense as objects, that to no longer identify with them and say, just because you think that, it's not necessarily true. It's not necessarily you, and it's not necessarily helpful. Right. Now, we can check and see if any of those three, propositions were true. Maybe it is you, maybe you do believe it, and maybe it is useful. But we're going to start by hypothesizing that some of these automatic thoughts are actually what's driving your misery. Right. And I really also see that as a tremendous danger of totalitarian ideologies, because they're thought systems that are almost entirely foreign in some sense to the individual person, that invade that cognitive space that you're describing and then manifest themselves as unquestioning identity. And if they're blinding the person to some underlying reality that's actually revivifying and nourishing and an antidote to suffering, then they're a tremendous block to exactly that process. One of the things that people might want to know who are listening is that if you have a memory that's older than about 18 months and it haunts you, and when it comes up involuntarily, it produces a stress reaction, what that means is that as far as your nervous system is concerned, and so as far as your body's concerned, that danger hasn't gone away. And what's happening is an unconscious alarm system that's looking for pitfalls and holes is warning you that the map that you're using is incomplete in a manner that might enable you to fall into the same hole. And so one of the things that people can do that's very useful is, if you have memories like that plague you, is to bring them to mind voluntarily instead of waiting for them to come after you involuntarily. And then to think through what has changed and what might not have, but also to come up with a plan so that if a similar circumstance arose, you'd be in a better position in one way or another to deal with it. There's no other way of getting the memory to go away. Like merely recontemplating it in the same manner over and over won't do it. And allowing it to plague you unconsciously, it'll do that forever.